Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. I'm your host, Jon Hubbard, shareholder here at Boomer Consulting, and with me today is Marc Staut. Hi, Marc.
Hi, Jon. Thanks for having me on again.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. So Marc is also a shareholder here at Boomer Consulting, but Marc is also our Chief Innovation and Technology Officer. And so previous to Boomer Consulting, you were a CIO for many years. And so you're perfectly suited for this topic that we're going to be discussing, and that is how firms need to rethink the role of IT. You have been an advocate for IT and IT leadership at the very top of accounting firms for a really long time. So when you are talking about rethinking the role, I'm actually really interested in kind of what you're seeing evolving there. So my first question for you, Marc, is why is it important for firms to rethink the role of IT?
Yeah, it's been a bit of an evolution, right? Back in the day when you hired an IT person, it was because you needed somebody to fix things. They would break, they needed to be fixed. Back when I started out, we actually used to take computers apart and swap out different pieces. We would repair them. It was much more hardware based. As things have gone forward, the software has become more and more important. The applications that we use are actually what is making the computers so valuable as a resource to the firm. And we kind of have gotten away from the break and fix role. So that has been an evolution that has been happening for quite some time. Taking it even a step further, though, when you start thinking of your technology as managing your servers, managing those applications, that is also starting to change. And we're starting to see much more focus on a strategic role that your technology team can play inside the firm. They can be finding new solutions. They can be driving innovation. They can be maximizing the technology that you already have, as opposed to just thinking of them as a break and fix type of response group. It's much more proactive, much more strategic.
Nice. No, that makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about the evolution of how firms no longer have some of that hardware in their space that they used to, with this whole blow up to virtual kind of what the new normal is going to look like in that virtual setting, I think what you're saying makes a lot of sense. So talk to me a little bit about how firms are, or how you're advising firms actually approach this, because I think kind of the vision you just cast there, a lot of firms would agree, say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, that's the direction our firm needs to go. But sometimes they struggle with the how. What are some components that they can actually start doing to kind of truly rethink that role of IT? What advice do you have in that area?
Yeah, it is. It definitely is a shift in mindset to thinking of technology less as a cost center and less operational and much more strategic. So you've got to have that mindset shift. And in order to really start leveraging technology leaders strategically, you need to invite them to have a seat at the table. They have to be in the room where it's going to happen, so that you are getting their input and their insights, and they are understanding what the overall firm objectives are. Way too often I go into firms and we see that there's a disconnect between the business side and the technology side. And it's almost like they're not even talking to each other. Technology's working really, really hard to do the best that they can, and they're driving towards what they think is the goal. And the business is going, what are these guys doing? We want to go over here. We wanted to go right, not left. And so there's this disconnect because they aren't actually in the same room during the visioning, during the planning, at that opportunity to be strategic. And so technology oftentimes gets kind of roped into being a little bit more reactionary than they would like to be, or that the firm would like them to be.
Right. And so, Marc, I know you spend a lot of time with high-level CIOs within, accounting firms. You run, our CIO circle, as well. And, I would say for the most part, that audience really, is living what you're talking about here. They're true business leaders in their firm, not just IT leaders. And so as you think about all the other, kind of IT staff in the profession that may not be at that CIO level
Mhm.
yet, What's your advice to them in terms of, is it, think about being a business leader first before a technology leader? If you were to sit down having coffee with a, younger person in an IT role in a firm, what advice would you give them?
I would tell them to insert themselves into the process. A lot of times people are waiting to be asked for their opinion. They have it, they know what they want to do, they know what the firm should do, and they're waiting for a gold plated invitation to be handed to them to, oh, now please tell me what your views are. Be aggressive. Go and say, hey, I've got an idea. Doesn't mean that you have to be a bit of a jerk about it, but take some time. Invite some of the firm leaders to coffee. Walk, back in the days when you could walk by their office, go visit them. In these days, schedule a Zoom call to catch up and say, hey, I've got some things I want to run by you. Everybody appreciates a strategic focus like that. And having those ideas, even if they don't do anything with them, it starts to change the way that we're having the conversation, because now there is a path for us to start communicating on. So I wouldn't wait for those invitations. I would start to say, hey, if you've got ideas, put them in an email, schedule a call to talk over them, but get those ideas out there, because you're going to challenge their thinking just as much as it's challenging your own.
Yeah, I think that's really excellent advice, Mark, because oftentimes I can see those IT leaders wanting to be a part of certain conversations, but them not actually ever instigating similar type conversations themselves. Questions like, "Hey, if technology could help solve one critical business issue, what would that be?" Just if you just ask that question, right, you're going to get a lot of interesting responses. Now you're a part of,
Yeah.
great conversations.
Yeah, and not just one business issue. Even ask the question of, hey, how are we not leveraging technology as much as we should be?
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that we have to go out and spend $1 million on a new application stack, or invest in new hardware. What are we not leveraging that we already have is a great place to start those conversations.
Right. No, that's really good. So, speak to me about firms that you're familiar with, firms that you've probably have worked with that are, doing a really good job of rethinking this role of IT, and what type of success and results are they experiencing when they really kind of position IT in a way that you're talking about?
Yeah, it's funny if you start including IT in some of the conversations early and often. And I think back to some of the acquisitions, the M&As that have happened over the years, and how IT would find out right, like with 6 days to go, or right after everything was signed, and they're like, there's an aspect of due diligence we need to be doing here too, and they could be contributing to the negotiation, saying, yeah, we don't want their hardware, we don't want their systems, but you bought it, so now we kind of have to figure out how to use it. So there's a very tactile approach to it, where it's immediate, but it also becomes part of the planning process. And so all of a sudden, when you start including the technology leaders in the conversation a little bit more, then you can anticipate better. So you're starting to define that vision, and everybody is starting to move towards the same goal. That's where you start to get your exponential results. And you're able to say, yes, I want to do, here's the goal. I'm going to empower the different areas to do this. Now, what do we get when we bring all of the people together, versus saying, okay, we did this, now go make it happen. That's a pretty big difference in approach. And that's just one example with the M&As. But when you start to look at your technology leaders, and outside of the CPA profession, other companies are starting to realize that technology is playing a major role in talent, in finance, and they have much more of an oversight of the operational role. So we start to see some technology leaders move into an operational role for the business, because they are so involved in all of the different pieces there. They understand the business at a level that a lot of the other strategic leaders don't always get to see. So if you're not leveraging that inside your own business or your own firm, you're missing out on a really great resource.
So you mentioned kind of outside the accounting profession, which is which is definitely an interesting topic. And so you kind of touched on that piece already, but I think what you're also seeing out there is that the accounting profession is actually changing how it looks in terms of the firms, you know, the services firms are providing, the kind of merging in a cybersecurity company, merging in a marketing organization, merging in a, and the diversity of services is changing. So what's going on outside the accounting profession traditionally is now inside their four walls, so to speak. Are you seeing that happen as well?
Absolutely. And it's a great way to have some perspective on that. Think what your clients are looking for are the same things that you're looking for. So if you are leveraging technology strategically and using them as a competitive advantage, once you have that figured out for yourself, you can then turn around and offer those same services to your clients. Process automation is a really good example of that happening. Firms are saying, wow, this is really inefficient for us to have these 6 administrative people who are pulling these reports together and spending 50, 60, 75% of their time pulling this. Why can't we write a process and automate it that's going to do that? You free up time, you free up resources, you're already moving the mark forward. Now you start talking to your clients about it. They're like, oh, that's great. Can you do that for us? And now you've got a new service line. There are so many of the service lines that we're starting to see come up that are technology driven, because our world is much more technology driven, especially after 2020, when we had to rely on our technology to keep us connected, keep us collaborating, make sure that we are, having digital processes all the way through. Technology is more important today than it ever has been, and it's not going to go backwards.
Right. So let's say someone's listening to this podcast right now and they're saying, man, Marc is spot on. This needs to be happening in our firm, or maybe I'm an IT leader and I want to kind of grow in this, in this area. What advice do you have in terms of next steps? What are some of the next steps a person should take after listening to this?
It's a really easy one. It's to have those conversations. It's to sit down and say, hey, where are we headed? And if you don't have a strategic plan for your firm, and if you don't have a technology roadmap, then reach out to us or to somebody else that can help you get that. It's an investment that is going to help clarify what it is that you're trying to do. And both the technology roadmap and the firm's strategic plan need to have components of each other built into them, because that's where you're going to see the exponential gains.
That's great. So, Marc, I know you are pretty active on social media. You put content out there on social media. Where can our listeners find you on social media?
You can definitely find me on Twitter at CPA Tech Geek, but I'm also on LinkedIn. Would love to make connections with you there. Give me some feedback about this and let me know what your perspectives are. I love having technology and strategy conversations, so I would encourage everybody to reach out and find me on LinkedIn.
Awesome, Marc. Thank you. And thanks again for being on this episode of the Boomer Briefing. Always a pleasure. And for our listeners, just a reminder that every Tuesday morning we release a new episode. So if you like this style of conversation and like this content, please subscribe and know that next Tuesday will be a new episode. Thanks so much, everyone.